بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. One of the remarkable things about the Imams of the past, about the great scholars of the Salaf, is how accomplished they were, how they excelled not just in one field, one area, but they excelled in many different areas. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was one such example. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah did not just excel in one area. He did not just excel in ilm and fiqh, for which we recognize him, but he excelled in many different areas. He excelled in his ibadah, in his taqwa, in his wara', his scrupulousness. He excelled in his ruhaniyah, in his spiritual position, which is why he had such imams of spirituality like Dawood al-Ta'i and Fudayl ibn Iyad, who kept his company. And he was known for a number of other things, other achievements. He was recognized for his generosity, his sakha. He was recognized for his istighna, his being self-sufficient, not depending on anybody, running his own successful business. He was recognized for his political activism, for his birr to his mother, being kind and dutiful and respectful and generous to his mother. He was recognized for his courage, for his wit, for his intelligence, and so on and so on. But of course, the thing that we recognize Imam Abu Hanifa the most for is his fiqh and is his madhab, and that's what we're indebted to him for as an ummah. Not just because the majority of the Muslims today follow the madhab, follow the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa, but also because, as Mufti Rahman hinted to, Imam Abu Hanifa's madhab and the contributions of Imam Abu Hanifa really were the impetus and was what propelled the creation of other madhabs. So all the madhabs are actually indebted to Imam Abu Hanifa. But before I get to that, I just wanted to mention a point of interest, which is that Imam Abu Hanifa was in fact the founder of two madhabs. Not just a madhab in fiqh, he was also the founder of a madhab in aqidah. In fact, he was the founder of the first Sunni school in aqidah. And Imam Abu Hanifa has a number of works, pieces of writing to his name, and the majority of them are actually on the subject of aqidah. The actual codification, writing down of his output in fiqh was mainly done by his students. But the works written by him or dictated by him directly are mainly on the subject of aqidah. And there are 5 in particular which are famous: Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, Al-Fiqh al-Absat, Al-Wasiyya, Al-Risala ila Uthman al-Batti, and Al-Alim wal-Muta'allim. And in a couple of these works, Imam Abu Hanifa even gives a rationale, an explanation for why he is engaging in the study while the Sahaba before him, because remember Imam Abu Hanifa is from the generation after the Sahaba. He's from the Tabi'in, the younger Tabi'in. So he saw at least one of the Sahaba. So he explains why the Sahaba before him did not engage in the study of Aqidah in the systematic way that he was, but why he is. So he says the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were theologically dominant. They were ideologically dominant. They did not have to put up this defense. But we are living in a time of the Mu'tazila, of the Jahmiyyah, of the Mushabbiha, of the Shia, and so on. So we have to put up our defenses. Otherwise, people will be plagued by doubts. And in one of these works of Imam Abu Hanifa, Al-Fiqh al-Absat, he defines fiqh, because in Imam Abu Hanifa's understanding, Aqidah is actually included within fiqh. So he says, what is fiqh? Fiqh is معرفة النفس ما لها وما عليها في الاعتقاديات وفي الأحكام. He says fiqh is to recognize what is valid for oneself and what is obligatory, what is necessary for oneself in terms of religious beliefs and in terms of religious rulings. And then he says Aqidah is the greater fiqh, is al-fiqh al-akbar. Right? But the point being that Imam Abu Hanifa founded this school of Aqidah. And these texts of Imam Abu Hanifa were not really, he didn't really organize them into subjects and chapters and so on. But there was a scholar from about 300 to 400 years ago, Allama al-Bayadi. He collected all of these texts of Imam Abu Hanifa and he organized them into chapters. And he added some other transmissions from Imam Abu Hanifa. And he called it Al-Usul al-Munifa lil Imam Abi Hanifa. And then he also wrote a detailed commentary on it. And I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with the Aqidah text of Imam al-Tahawi. Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah was only about, say, 2-3 generations after Imam Abu Hanifa. And in that famous Aqidah text of his, he explains at the beginning that هذا ذكر بيان عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة على مذهب فقهاء الملة أبي حنيفة النعمان بن ثابت الكوفي, and so on. He says this is an account explaining the Aqidah of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah according to the madhab of the fuqaha of this religion, Abu Hanifa and his students. And when you look at the statements of Imam al-Tahawi in that Aqidah and the text of Imam Abu Hanifa in those works, you see clear parallels. So you can see that Imam al-Tahawi is probably drawing from those same material. And at the same time as Imam al-Tahawi was more towards the west in Egypt, more towards the east, there was Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, and he took the writings of Imam Abu Hanifa and he developed them into a systematic school of Kalam, which is why this school of Aqidah is known as the Maturidi school, but really it's the Hanafi school of Aqidah. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, this is a remarkable accomplishment, remarkable achievement, and shows his genius, the fact that he created two madhabs, one madhab in Aqidah and one madhab in fiqh. And of course what he's more recognized for is his madhab in fiqh. So first of all, we're using this term repeatedly, madhab. Well, what does madhab mean? Okay. So madhab has a very broad sense and then a more specific sense. In a broad sense, madhab just means an opinion. So you can say that the madhab of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu on this issue was such and such, or the madhab of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu on this issue was such and such. So it's just an opinion, a position on a point of controversy, whether in fiqh or aqidah. But then madhab has a more specific sense, which is a comprehensive set of rulings on all issues of fiqh. Okay. So a comprehensive set of rulings. And this is the meaning of madhab, which is Imam Abu Hanifa's contribution. So what is it that's new that Imam Abu Hanifa contributed? You can say it's two things. Number one is tabweeb, and number two is tadween. Okay, so number one, tabweeb, is what Imam Abu Hanifa did is fiqh is a very, very vast subject. And it deals with all aspects of life, but broadly speaking, you can divide fiqh into three areas. The first area, ibadat, acts of worship like salah, zakah, sawm, hajj. And second area, like dealings, interactions, huquq, obligations and rights, like buying and selling, marriage, the rules of the state, how the state deals with its subjects, how the state deals with other states, and so on. All of that's included within the second area. And then the third area, like halal and haram. What can I eat, what can I not eat, what can I look at, what can I not look at, and so on. So what Imam Abu Hanifa did was he took all of these subjects and he divided them into topics and subtopics. And then he gave each of them questions, masail, scenarios that needed to be addressed. And then after presenting all of the masail, he gave his, after long thought and consultation, he gave his ra'i, his considered opinion on all of those masail. And it was this structure that Imam Abu Hanifa created, which then became the template or the model that the other Imams after him followed to create their own madhab. And this is part of what Imam Shafi'i was referring to when he said, "An-nasu ayalun ala Abi Hanifa fil fiqh," that people are dependent on Abu Hanifa fil fiqh. This is part of what he's referring to. The other thing that he was referring to is what Mufti Rahman alluded to, which is that Imam Abu Hanifa showed people how to do fiqh. The methodology. How do you take out rulings from the sources of Sharia? How do you create a consistent narrative when it comes to the rulings of Sharia? Okay. Right. So this is the first contribution, tabweeb. The second was tadween, which is this massive body of rulings, putting it down into writing. See, writing was not really a norm for, we could say, the first 100 or so years in the Islamic civilization. It was when they did have writing, it was more just for a personal record to help them remember, or it was something along those lines. It wasn't really to share it with other people. But then in the 140s, so this is 140s of Hijrah. It's about 130 years after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ died in the 11th year of Hijrah. Imam Abu Hanifa, this is what Al-Dhahabi mentions, Imam Abu Hanifa began to do tadween of fiqh. And he was the first one to do that. So to record and codify these masail of fiqh. And then he was followed by those after him. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and his students, they represent the greatest personalities, and that's the most important period for the madhab. But the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa is not limited to that. It's not limited to them, nor is it limited to that period. The madhab has roots from which it originated, and then after the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa was created, it was worked on, it was toiled on. A lot of effort was put into it by scholars after. So we're going to quickly look through these three periods: Imam Abu Hanifa and the roots of his madhab, and then the work of the scholars after him. So first of all, with Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was an absolute genius in fiqh. So what is fiqh? Rasulullah in a very well-known hadith, he mentioned, نَضَّرَ اللَّهُ امْرَأً سَمِعَ مَقَالَتِي فَوَعَاهَا فَأَدَّاهَا كَمَا سَمِعَهَا فَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ إِلَى مَنْ هُوَ أَفْقَهُ مِنْهُ. That may Allah illuminate the face of a person who hears what I have said, who preserves it, and then he conveys it in just the same way that he heard it. Because sometimes the one who's carrying knowledge passes it on to somebody who has more understanding of it, who has more fiqh in it. And the prime example of that is the account that Mufti Rahman mentioned to you, where Imam Abu Hanifa was on one occasion sitting in the company of one of his teachers in hadith, Imam al-A'mash, Sulaiman ibn Mihran al-A'mash, who was a major muhaddith and muqri' of Kufa. and somebody entered the gathering and asked Al-A'mash a question. And Al-A'mash said to Abu Hanifa, Aftih Nu'man. Nu'man, Imam Abu Hanifa's name is Nu'man. Tell him the answer. So Imam Abu Hanifa told him the answer. And then Al-A'mash said, where did you get this from? And Imam Abu Hanifa replied, I got it from the hadith that you narrated to me. And then he mentioned the hadith that Al-A'mash himself narrated to Imam Abu Hanifa. And then Imam Al-A'mash made that famous statement, Ya ma'ashar al-fuqaha, O assembly of fuqaha, O those who possess fiqh, those who are endowed with fiqh, Antumul atibba wa nahnu as-sayadila. That you are the doctors and we are the physicians, we are the pharmacists. Alright, so we have knowledge of the hadith, but you know how to apply them. You know how to derive rulings from them. And Imam Abu Hanifa was widely recognized for this ability. And there are so many statements from the Salaf saying that Imam Abu Hanifa is afqahu ahli zamani. He has the greatest fiqh from his contemporaries. So Sufyan al-Thawri said that, Abdullah ibn Mubarak said that, and many of the other contemporaries of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, there are works that have entries on Imam Abu Hanifa's biographies, and even some full works just on Imam Abu Hanifa's biography. And there, one of the things that is transmitted from Imam Abu Hanifa is his methodology. How does he come to a conclusion in a mas'ala of fiqh? So there are several statements from him, but one very comprehensive statement is found in Tarikh Baghdad, of Khatib Baghdadi, and Al-Intiqa of Ibn Abdul Barr. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he mentioned his methodology as follows. He says, إِنِّي أَخَذْتُ بِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ إِذَا وَجَدْتُهُ. That first of all, I adopt a ruling from the Quran. So when I find the ruling in the Quran, then I will take the ruling from the Quran. And there are many ahkam which you will find in the Quran. Like for example, the rules of inheritance. When somebody dies, how is their estate, what they leave behind, how is that going to be distributed amongst their heirs, amongst their relatives? There's a detailed description of the rulings of that in the Quran. And for example, the rules of fasting. When do you fast? What time do you begin the fast? What time do you end the fast? ثُمَّ أَتِمُّ الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. That's also found in the Quran. But then there are some rulings that are not found in the Quran. Like how many times do you pray each day? And how many rak'ats does each salah have? That's not found in the Quran. So Imam Abu Hanifa then says, فَمَا لَمْ أَجِدْهُ فِيهِ أَخَذْتُ بِسُنَّةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وسلم وَالْآثَارِ الصِّحَاحِ عَنْهُ الَّتِي فَشَتْ فِي أَيْدِ الثِّقَاتِ عَنِ الثِّقَاتِ. So if I don't find it in the Quran, then I take the ruling from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the authentic hadiths from him that have been passed down from the hands of reliable transmitters to other reliable transmitters. Alright, so this is a very important source for the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa, the authentic and the sahih hadiths from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is something that we will come back to. And then it says, فَإِذَا لَمْ أَجِدْهُ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ وَلَا سُنَّةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. But if I don't find it in the Quran, nor in the Sunnah, أَخَذْتُ بِقَوْلِ أَصْحَابِهِ. Then I take the view of his Sahaba, the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. مَنْ شِئْتُ وَأَدَعُ قَوْلَ مَنْ شِئْتُ. But if the Sahaba differed, then I will choose which qawl, which view to adopt based on my ijtihad, and I will leave the view of the Sahaba which I choose to. ثُمَّ لَا أَخْرُجُ عَنْ قَوْلِهِمْ إِلَى قَوْلِ غَيْرِهِمْ. But I will not leave the view of the Sahaba as a collective. So if the Sahaba had 2 or 3 views on a subject, he will adopt one of those views, but he will not invent a 4th view. And then he says, فَإِذَا انْتَهَى الْأَمْرُ إِلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ. So if the mas'ala, for example, is not found in the Quran, it's not found in the Sahih Sunnah, it's not found from the Sahaba, then what? فإذا انتهى الأمر إلى إبراهيم والشعبي والحسن وعطاء وابن سيرين وسعيد بن المسيب وعدد رجالا فقوم قد اجتهدوا ولي أن أجتهد كما اجتهدوا. Then if the ruling is only found from, and he mentioned some of the senior tabi'in, fuqaha from the senior tabi'in before him, like Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, Amir al-Sha'bi, al-Hasan al-Basri, Muhammad ibn Sirin, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, Sa'id al-Musayyib, and several others, then they are people that perform ijtihad, so I will perform ijtihad just like they did. As in, I'm not bound by their opinions. Okay. So one of the things that we get from this statement of Imam Abu Hanifa is how sound and pure his methodology was. And Imam Abu Hanifa had a body of scholars around him who he would consult before coming to a conclusion on a mas'ala. And some of these scholars in that council were actually great scholars of hadith. Right? Like Yahya ibn Zakaria ibn Abi Za'idah, Ali ibn Mushir, and others. And one of the, you could say the Imam al-A'imma, probably the greatest Imam of hadith in his time, Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan. Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, who was from Basra, which is also in Iraq. So Imam Abu Hanifa is from Kufa in Iraq, and it's not too far from Basra. And Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan is like a generation after Imam Abu Hanifa. He saw Imam Abu Hanifa, and he is on par with great muhaddithin like Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, Waqi ibn Jarrah, Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi. So he's probably even greater than them. And Ahmad ibn Hanbal said about Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, "Ma ra'aytu mithlahu," I've not seen anybody like him. And Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan said that I follow the madhab, or he said that I've not seen anything better than the madhab, the ra'i of Abu Hanifa. And he said, وَقَدْ أَخَذْنَا بِأَكْثَرِ أَقْوَالِهِ. In fact, I've adopted the majority of his views. I've taken as my personal practice the majority of the views of Imam Abu Hanifa. And Yahya ibn Ma'in, one of the students of Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, mentions that Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan would seek out the fatwa from the Ahlul Kufa, and he would try to find specifically what is the view of Imam Abu Hanifa so he could follow them. So this is a great testament. This is a great testament to the fact that Imam Abu Hanifa's fiqh is not alien to, is not foreign to hadith, but is fully in line with and is fully in accordance with the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I have a quote here from a Western academic, Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah. He has an academic book called Malik al-Medina. And he says, and this is a quote from his book, in contrast to prevailing notions, one of the striking differences between the considered opinion, meaning the madhab or ra'i, of Malik and Abu Hanifa is that Abu Hanifa was surprisingly more textually deferential and hadith oriented than Malik. So Abu Hanifa was more textually deferential and hadith oriented than Malik. In other words, Imam Abu Hanifa would not dismiss hadith. Hadith was a fundamental part of his fiqh. And when it came to qiyas, of course qiyas is a legitimate source of sharia. But Imam Abu Hanifa would not employ qiyas against nas, against a clear directive of the Quran and the Sunnah. And in doing something like that, in using qiyas, employing qiyas against nas, Imam Abu Hanifa said, "Al-bawlu fil masjid ahsanu min ba'd al-qiyas." He said, urinating in the masjid is better than some qiyas. So if you're going to use qiyas, when you've got a clear text, then you're no better than shaitan. That's exactly what shaitan did. Shaitan was given a clear command, but he tried to use his own reasoning, his own logic, and his own qiyas to override that command from Allah. And Imam Abu Hanifa, of course, was very far removed from that. And there are many examples of that. One famous example is that according to Imam Abu Hanifa's madhab, if you laugh out loud in salah, your wudu breaks. If you laugh out loud in salah, your wudu breaks. But strict logic and qiyas would dictate that your wudu does not break. Because if you talk in salah, for example, does your wudu break? No, it doesn't break. And talking, arguably, is worse than laughing. So, according to strict analogy, laughing should not break your wudu. But Imam Abu Hanifa, he abandons qiyas because there's a text, there's a hadith which says that if you laugh in salah, your wudu breaks. And there are several other examples like that. But at the same time, this does not mean when looking at a text, when looking at an ayah of the Quran or a hadith of Rasulullah, that one freezes his brain, one abandons his reason. Of course, you have to use your reason to make sense of the text. You have to use your understanding to interpret the text. And this is what's called a ra'i. It's not qiyas, this is ra'i, this is ta'wil. And sometimes, because Imam Abu Hanifa's ra'i and ta'wil of a text might have at times seemed like Imam Abu Hanifa was rejecting that text, that's why people interpreted it as Imam Abu Hanifa dismissing hadith on some occasion. And this is expressed in a statement from Imam Abu Hanifa. He said, لا يستقيم أن يكون صاحب رأي ليس له علم بالسنة ولا صاحب حديث ليس له علم بالفقه. Right, so a person of fiqh, a person who has fiqh, he can't do fiqh without hadith. But at the same time, a person with expertise in hadith, he cannot really have true expertise in hadith, in understanding the hadith, in understanding its applicability, unless he has fiqh. Right? A statement of Rasulullah or something attributed to him, recorded from him, might be specific to him, might be specific to Rasulullah, might be specific to the individual he's speaking to, or the audience he's speaking to, or it might be abrogated. So in order to understand how a hadith is employed, it's necessary to have ra'i, to have fiqh. And part of the methodology of Imam Abu Hanifa, as I mentioned, was that he would consult with a body of scholars. And these were scholars of very, very high caliber. Once after the death of Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, somebody said to a great Imam of Hadith from Kufa, who had met Imam Abu Hanifa and sat in his company, Waqi ibn al-Jarrah. He said to Waqi ibn al-Jarrah, a very famous Imam of Hadith, أخطأ Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa made an error, on some mas'ala. And Waqi ibn al-Jarrah said, how is it possible for Abu Hanifa to err? كيف يقدر? How can he err? When in his company were the likes of Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Zufar with their qiyas, with the knowledge of logic and reasoning. And with him were the likes of Hafs ibn Ghiyath and Yahya ibn Zakaria ibn Abi Zaida in the knowledge of hadith. And with him were the likes of Qasim ibn Ma'an with his knowledge of lugha and language. And with him were the likes of Fudail ibn Iyad and Dawood al-Ta'i with their piety and their zuhud. If ever Imam Abu Hanifa erred, they would have returned him to what is correct. They would have corrected him. Another very important part of the methodology of Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, is what's called Sunnah Mashhura. So Imam Abu Hanifa, as I mentioned, his first source of legislation was the Quran, and then the Sunnah, and then the Aqwal, the statements of the Sahaba, and then he would employ Qiyas and Ijtihad. But when it comes to the sunnah, the ahadith of Rasulullah, sometimes you've got conflicting narrations from the Prophet ﷺ. And you have to remember that Imam Abu Hanifa was living in the time of the Salaf. He was born in the year 80 after Hijrah, and he died in the year 150. So 80 after Hijrah is how many years after the death of the Prophet ﷺ? 70, about 70. Right, so not too long after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. So he's living at a time when Islam is a lived reality. He's seeing Islam. So when conflicting narrations would come to him, some narrations would be called Sunnah Mashhura. Sunnah Mashhura meaning a narration from the Prophet ﷺ that is supported, that is reflected by the practice of the Sahaba, of those before Imam Hanifa. So that's you could say, an accepted Sunnah. But then there are some narrations that come which go against the Sunnah Mashhura, and he called that Shadh. So something isolated. Maybe it was a personal practice that the Prophet ﷺ was referring to. Maybe it's something that's abrogated. Maybe it's something that's interpreted in some other way. So Imam Abu Hanifa would give preference to the Sunnah Mashhura, so which really is the amal of the Sahaba before him, which is something that from Imam Abu Hanifa's vantage point made complete sense. So as in the madhab, his methodology, it was not just something completely theoretical and he was just doing bookwork and he came to some conclusions. No, it was not like that. He saw Islam being lived. He saw Islam as a reality. And based on that reality, that would inform which sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ he regarded as authentic and which he dismissed as inauthentic. And this is explained by his student Imam Abu Yusuf, in particular in a work called Ar-Raddu ala Siyar al-Awza'i. And Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, was a very global scholar. So he was based in Iraq, in Kufa, but he would make frequent visits to the Hijaz. He performed many Hajj, so he would go to Mecca and Medina frequently. So he was much more of a global scholar in the sense that there were individual scholars who were quite biased towards the ilm and the scholars and the fuqaha of their region. Okay. Like for example Imam Malik. So Imam Malik was very biased towards the ilm of Medina and the ilm of Ahlul Medina. Or for example, take the teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa. The teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa, his name is Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman. That's his main teacher. That's the teacher that he spent about 20 years with. Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman was a product of the scholarship of Kufa in Iraq. So he was biased towards that scholarship. And once he visited Mecca, and he sat in the company of the greatest scholar of Mecca, Ata ibn Abi Rabah. And he came back to Kufa. And the people in Kufa asked Hamad, how did you find Ata? What do you think of Ata? And Hamad's response was, Sibyanukum afqahu min Ata. Bal Sibyanu Sibyanikum afqahu min Ata. He said, your children have more fiqh than Ata. In fact, your children's children have more fiqh than Ata. Of course, this was hyperbole, this was exaggeration. But he was just trying to exaggerate the point that fiqh resides here. Fiqh is here in Kufa. This is where you have ilm, this is where you have fiqh. You won't get it there. This was, as I said, their bias towards their city, because that's what they're familiar with. If they're not aware of something outside of the city, then best just to avoid it. But Imam Abu Hanifa was not like that. He visited, as I said, he visited the Hijaz frequently. And he had much more of an opportunity to sit in the company of Ata ibn Abi Rabah and take from his hadith, take from his fiqh. And Imam Abu Hanifa actually came to the conclusion, ما رأيت أفضل من عطاء. I've not seen anybody like Ata. I've not seen anybody better than Ata. So he even preferred Ata ibn Abi Rabah over his own teacher, Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman. But of course, that does not mean that Imam Abu Hanifa was not a product of Kufa. He was. And Imam Abu Hanifa was intimately familiar with the ilm of Kufa. And the ilm of Kufa really, Kufa was a town that was created by the Muslims. So there are towns that are created by the Muslims: Kufa, Basra, Baghdad. Baghdad was created towards the end of the life of Imam Abu Hanifa, and Imam Abu Hanifa was escorted there, and he was imprisoned, and that's where he died. And then there are pre-Islamic cities like Damascus, Dimashq. So Kufa was one of the cities that were created by the Muslims, and many Sahaba took up residence there. And Umar radiallahu anhu, he sent one of the greatest Sahaba as a teacher to the people of Kufa. And that Sahabi was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu is a very, very immense personality. And so much could be said. Books have been written on Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, and his fiqh, his hadith, his knowledge of Quran in particular, and how great of a ustad he was, how great of a teacher he was. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he made Kufa into a city of knowledge, into a city of ilm. And he established a group of very, very learned scholars. And these learned scholars from the Tabi'in are called Ashabu Abdullah. Okay, the Ashabu Abdullah. A very, very famous group. And you'll find, the Muhaddithun, when they mention an individual, they say, Min Ashabi Abdullah. He's from the companions of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. And Amir al-Sha'bi, one of the students of these Ashab, he said there's nobody greater, there's no group of people greater than the Sahaba of Rasulullah. Now after the Sahaba of Rasulullah, the greatest group of people are the Ashab of Abdullah, the Ashab of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. So these included the likes of Alqama and Al-Aswad and Abida al-Salmani, Masruq ibn al-Ajda', Zir ibn Hubaysh, and many others. And these Ashab of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, there were three main scholars who inherited their knowledge: Amir al-Sha'bi, Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i, and Ibrahim al-Nakhai. And Imam Abu Hanifa studied directly under Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i. And Ibrahim al-Nakhai, one of his main students was Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman. And Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman was the teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa, who he spent 20 years with. So this is the roots. These are the roots from which the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa comes. Then following Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, his students had the difficult task of all of this knowledge, all of this information, pouring it down and writing it down in a consistent way. And this job really went to somebody called the Mudawwin of the Hanafi madhab, the codifier of the Hanafi madhab, and that's Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, who was he was a student of Imam Abu Hanifa. He spent about 5 years in the company of Imam Abu Hanifa, from the age of 14 till about the age of 19. And then he studied with the main student of Imam Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf. And then he went to Medina and studied with Imam Malik for 3 years as well. And Imam Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani, what he did was, all of these chapters in fiqh, he gave them he wrote books on them. So he wrote a Kitab al-Salah, for example, a Kitab al-Sawm, Kitab al-Zakah, Kitab al-Manasik and Hajj, Kitab al-Ashriba, Kitab al-Adab al-Qadi. He wrote books on each of these subtopics or each of these topics of fiqh. And then these books were all compiled into a huge compendium. And this compendium is called Al-Asl or Al-Mabsut. And Imam Muhammad, he probably did get some help in writing these books. A help in the sense that he was basing it on probably other material that was written by others of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa. Like, for example, it's recorded that one of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, Abu Mu'adh al-Balkhi, he had written a Kitab al-Hayd, a book on menstruation. And Imam Muhammad also has a Kitab al-Hayd in his Al-Asl. And it said that Imam Muhammad took his Kitab al-Hayd from Abu Mu'adh al-Balkhi and just made some adjustments. So this Al-Asl of Imam Muhammad, this is the Asl of the Hanafi madhab. This is the foundation of the Hanafi madhab. But it's also the Asl of madhabs in general. It's also the Asl of all madhabs, all recognized madhabs. So Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah was a direct student of Imam Muhammad. Imam al-Shafi'i could say where he really acquired fiqh, this skill and this ability to derive and take out rulings and to understand nusus in a consistent way. He got it really from Muhammad. He got that skill from Muhammad, and that's why he said "Amannu nasi alayya fil fiqh Muhammad ibn Hasan." The person that benefited me the most, or that I am most indebted to in fiqh, is Muhammad ibn Hasan. And he said, "Hamaltu wiqra ba'ir." I carried a camel load of knowledge from Imam Muhammad. And al-Shafi'i, he wrote a very well-known work on fiqh called Al-Umm, and that work Al-Umm is patterned after Al-Asl. So the Shafi'i madhab really derives, in terms of its structure anyway, from the works of Muhammad and from the fiqh of Abu Hanifa. And similarly, how was the Maliki madhab codified? Imam Malik, he did not really write much. He had some points of fiqh that he had written in his Muwatta. But really it was transmissions from him that became his madhab. So he had a student from North Africa by the name of Asad ibn al-Furat. And Asad ibn al-Furat studied with Imam Malik, and then he went to Iraq, studied with Imam Muhammad, and he took that template, that structure. Then he went to Egypt, which was the place where you had the most eminent students of Imam Malik, like Abdullah ibn Wahab and Abdul Rahman ibn Qasim. And he went to Abdul Rahman ibn Qasim, and he said to Abdul Rahman ibn Qasim, what is the madhab of Imam Malik on these issues, on these masail, on these scenarios that were devised by Abu Hanifa and his students? And Abdul Rahman ibn Qasim would give him the madhab of Imam Malik, or what he believed to be the madhab of Imam Malik, if he did not hear it directly from Imam Malik. And then this became known as the Asadiyya. And Asad ibn al-Furat took this back with him to his hometown. And somebody from there, another great Imam called Suhnun, he copied the Asadiyya and he took it back to Abdul Rahman ibn Qasim, that same student of Imam Malik, and he got it revised a little bit updated. And then that became known as the Mudawwana. Okay, and the Mudawwana is really the mother text of the Maliki madhab, is the foundational text of the Maliki madhab. So even that is indebted to the books of Imam Muhammad and the fiqh of Abu Hanifa. And Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, he was quite unique amongst the scholars of hadith, the Imams of hadith, in that he had this in-depth knowledge of fiqh, and he would mention intricate points of law, whereas the other imams of hadith around him, like Ali ibn al-Madini and Yahya ibn Ma'in and Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba and others of that group of scholars were not like that. So somebody came to Ahmad ibn Hanbal and said to him, هذه المسائل الدقائق من أين لك? Where do you get these intricate points of law? And he said, من كتب Muhammad ibn al-Hasan. I got these from the books of Muhammad ibn Hasan, meaning al-Asl. So all of these madhabs are connected in this way, and they are all indebted to Imam Abu Hanifa's fiqh and the work that Muhammad ibn Hasan rahimahullah put into it. Now following the circle of students of Imam Abu Hanifa, the scholars of the Hanafi madhab obviously had a huge body of work to work with, and they toiled on and they put a lot of effort into the madhab, and you can summarize their activities into four areas, into four activities. Number one, condensation. So all that information, so in Al-Asl, for example, Imam Muhammad, he wouldn't just mention the mas'ala. Sometimes he would give the reason why or how he came to that conclusion. Sometimes he mentioned the evidences. Sometimes there would be repetition. So though all of that, and it's been printed Al-Asl in about 12 volumes. So all of that information had to be condensed for a more lay readership. So Imam al-Tahawi was actually the author of the first Mukhtasar, the first condensed work on fiqh, on the Hanafi madhab. And then he was followed by Al-Qarhi and Al-Quduri and others. And then you had the activity of refining. So you had these works of Imam Muhammad which are transmitting authentic from Imam Abu Hanifa, but then you also had some inauthentic transmissions from Imam Abu Hanifa. So you have to sift out the authentic from the inauthentic. And you also have to define, what did Imam Abu Hanifa mean? So sometimes Imam Abu Hanifa said a mas'ala, would give a ruling, but that ruling is context specific, especially when it comes to alfaz, words and contracts and expressions. So he said that if you make this expression, then this is the rule. Obviously that would be very specific to his context and to the istilah, the nomenclature and the terminology of his time. So if that changes, if the meanings given to those terms changes, then the ruling will change. So that's the second activity. A third is to expand and to build on the madhab. So Imam Abu Hanifa and his students, there would be scenarios, there would be issues that would come up that they would probably not have addressed. So then what would Imam Abu Hanifa's view be on a certain mas'ala? So this is another thing that the scholars, the fuqaha of the Hanafi madhab after them worked on. And finally, argumentation. So it's not that you had a Hanafi madhab and they were completely isolated and insular. They did not interact. They could not talk with the people from the other madhabs. No, they engaged, and they engaged because they could engage, because it's fiqh, it's Islam, and the sources are the same: Quran, Sunnah, and Qiyas, and Ijma'. So right from the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf, and Imam Muhammad, and then those after them, they wrote works defending the positions of the Hanafi madhab against the position of the opposition. Okay, so Imam Hanifa's madhab is one that was created in the time of the Salaf, the Khayrul Qurun, the best of generations. It is one that has roots from the amal, from the ilm of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, and then it was worked on, it was toiled on, it was developed and expanded by great imams, by great scholars of fiqh and hadith for hundreds of years after. So this is a madhab, an ijtihad that is definitely more than worthy of being followed. Alhamdulillah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
Jazakallah khairan to Mufti.